fantastic. So by database in Python, we mean relational database, and we're going to be using Postgres for that. Postgres, and I guess we'll start with SQLite, which is built into Python. SQLite, I guess it's spelled. So any questions on content or skill trajectory? Okay. I want us to Python or Pandas and Matplotlib are really exciting tools, and I started digging into them last term and didn't know them very well when I started Python 2, and I had a crash course through them, and I'm now quite convinced that they are super powerful libraries. Okay, so with visualization, the set of projects that we ran last term are basically 3, and part of that was because it was my first time through the class. COVID hit and everything went a little bit bonkers, and so this is what has been planned so far, and I'm assuming that we're going to be able to significantly increase the pace that we run the class this term, because that's generally how it goes with the second pass or third pass through a course. So in terms of content, tonight I'd like to begin with thinking about indices and how do we create a single numeric value that can represent the underlying movements of several measures. And so my plan for tonight is to dig into indices using Gapminder, which you may remember from our very first night at Data 102 in terms of global development indicators. And the project to go along with indices is a neat one, and that is the Wikipedia, the Rescue Wikipedia project, which is something I'll introduce this evening. So Rescue Wikipedia. This is probably only 1 to 2 weeks worth. The next major project is called Visualize Yourself. And we'll watch a little introductory segment from me and one of my friends from grad school who went off and got another master's degree in data analytics, Navia, and we recorded our session from last term. And so I will introduce the Visualize Yourself project with a screening of our video from last term. So Visualize Yourself will invite you to choose some dimension of either your professional or personal life and create a data gathering and visualization tool that will allow you to make a data-backed claim about some pattern going on in your life or in your work organization, and expand that tool for use potentially beyond the class. And so my plan for tonight is to jump in. Actually, we'll probably start with Visualize Yourself in case we run out of time, because I want you to start mulling on what the right domain of inquiry should be, because next Monday is Labor Day, so we're going to have a 2-week block before we see each other again, and I'd like you to have enough knowledge about the project that you can start doing some mulling. And so Visualize Yourself is going to span the entire term, and so we'll take this chunk by chunk, and my ultimate goal is that the sequence here will be you'll build a beta gathering tool, a beta data gathering tool, build beta data tool, so you have time to test that beta tool, revise how you are aggregating and recording data, so revise tool, continue, so then maybe your primary phase, and then we want some time to draw some analysis, and then for a final project, we'll share out our insights from your own life and data gathering. So this is this will form the backbone of our time together. As usual with our data classes, I am extremely convinced that the most useful learning is going to come out of analyzing data, out of which you really care about extracting some conclusion. And one of the best ways to do that is for you to care about the underlying data. And so big questions, this is the chance for you to think big and broad about what kinds of domains you might want to gather data about, maybe even two overlapping. And then the third project is called the Data for Good project. And the Data for Good project is an attempt, so let's number these. Data for Good project is an attempt to create a contrast to the Visualize Yourself, where the target of the data is something in your own life or professional work, and the Data for Good project is a chance for your target to be an organization that you're not part of. And so this will invite you to choose a cause of any kind. I have one of the tools that we'll use is I get a lot of donation solicitations from nonprofits, and so I'll hundreds of these, and so I'll scan and we'll look through a bunch of them. You may already have a nonprofit or an organization that is working on an important issue, and our goal is to design a visualization of data to complement one of their campaigns. So design a visualization for an org that you care about the mission of. One of the notable things about these donation solicitations is almost none of them have data visualizations. The best thing I've gotten is Smile Train does cleft lip and palate surgeries, and they send out a great map with little graphs of how many surgeries they do in different parts. One of the very few. So I think this will be kind of a fun project, because if you're feeling good about this, I'd like to actually send them to the organization and propose that you find data about a cause that they're already engaged in, and suggest that perhaps this could be useful in some of their advertising. So those are the three projects that I have planned and slated, and depending on the speed, we might inject some more, because the pacing was pretty light last term. Questions so far on these projects? So this is smaller, this is medium, and this is the beefy one. Sound interesting?
What's a beta data tool?
You're going to build a data gathering tool about your question, and I want you to start with thinking about the first tool that you make as a draft. So I called it the beta data tool.
Okay.
So that you then revise it. What I found is using a data gathering instrument yields a lot of insights into how it could be improved.
Okay, nice.
Great. Oh, and then I guess I wouldn't necessarily call it a project, but we'll call it the textbook is, I'm going to invite each of you to choose a chapter from the book. Here's our, I'm going to wait till you get the book before we assign chapters, but one of the very useful exercises we did last term is you'll be invited to summarize some key ideas from the chapter, and then the most interesting part is choose a set of visualizations made by a third party, and our little chapter discussion will flow like this. You'll present the cliff notes of the design principle that Tofty lays out in the various chapter, the chapter that you chose, and then you'll present to the class 3 or more visualizations from third parties and ask the class to rank and rate those third-party visualizations using the principles laid out in the Tofty chapter. And some of the most interesting discussions from the class came out of the chance to critique third-party graphics. It's a lot easier to do than critiquing our own or each other's. And when the author's not in the room, things can be a little bit maybe more pointed, if you will. So please go ahead and order this book. Let's see. This was, my copy was given to me as a gift many years ago by a designer. Let's see how much it's going for.
Eric, I have it up on Amazon, and and it looks like the second edition has the same table of contents as the first. So, but it's as high as $37.50, but you can get a used hardcover at like $18.
Okay, great. That doesn't seem terrible. If they have the same table of contents, then get whatever edition you want. This is
the 2001's the second edition.
Okay, so this is definitely the first. Probably why they didn't label an edition. So yeah, go ahead and order that book, and then we'll make assignments to chapters when we get back from Labor Day. How's that sound? Okay, great. So that's our text. Let me pull up the syllabus. So as usual, with our classes, I've got a section. This is a subsection of the data world. So data 203 will jump you down, data analytics, and then I'll push this back up above the transportation analytics, that train wreck class last term. So our schedule here, and we've got a couple of the modules already built, so that's cool. So here's our schedule. So we're going to jump into indices tonight, and then I'm going to tinker around with the schedule a bit. I haven't compressed it yet. I just started with what we had from last term. So as usual, that's how our class will work, just as familiar from before. All right, next I call it class keeping instead of housekeeping. I'm trying a new, this is interesting since I was a vociferous opponent of online classes, as you may have known, all the way up until COVID hit, and then suddenly I had 7. And so when we started in COVID, we all knew each other. So when we jumped online, there was some existing relational glue. I'm starting over with, since we're starting the class online this term, I had to come up with a couple of new class structures. And the first is I'm going to invite you to choose two names for a total of 3 names. I call it the naming triumvirate. And so if you join me on technology rediscovery, at the very top, not the very top, on the first section, cross-course resources are the links we need. So here's how the naming system works in its current manifestation. You have an official name from the college. We want to keep that private, exclusively private. And so what I'm going to ask you to do is choose an official public identifier. Some of you, that's just going to be your first name. We have, I think, 2 people named Rachel back. So you can either choose your first name and an initial, or some people are jumping ship and they have a chosen name that's not related to their given name. So you'll choose that. And then I want you to choose a secret code name that is a name that nobody would easily associate with you digitally or otherwise. And this will give you a chance, if you so desire, to remain completely anonymous insofar as you would like to, especially because I'm going to try to do more real-time quizzes. We didn't do many of those before, but I'm renewing my plan to try to get more real-time data about class progress. And so I want you to be able to sign in. That's like a little real-time quiz tool where you'll put your name in there, and I want to be able to post those results and send them to the CCAC assessment team. And the best way to keep something secure is to never have it in a document or data store at all. And so you don't have to worry, did I scrub out everyone's name? So I don't ever want you to put it in the first place. I want you to enter your secret code name. So your name spelled backwards, for example, not a good secret code name. The sneaky folks among us, they'll be able to backwards identify it to yourself. So in order to register your names, I have a little form. So this is just a little Google Doc. So if you can take a minute, and all this is asking for is those 3 names: which class you're in, your official name from the records, how you want to be identified in public, and then your secret code name. So if you can take maybe 3 minutes and do that for us, that would be great. I'm going to get our next section queued up.
Sorry, can you tell me where this is located again? I'm sorry, because you told me.
Yep, so it's under cross-course resources, which is the first section after the YouTube link.
Oh.
It's also where all the grading stuff is.
Ah, thank you.
Yep, very top. I'm just going to pull up the response sheet so I can watch it all come in. Kayla, you chose the wrong class.
I did?
Yes. It's okay, I'll change it in the spreadsheet.
Sorry. That was a misclick.
It's okay. So this is kind of fun because I'm the only human that's supposed to know your code name, and so if I do my job right, it should just be a very closed loop situation. 6, 7, 8. So I'm going to be sure to turn this sheet off.
I'm embarrassed that I cannot find the link. Could you go over where?
Yep, on the index, just type in, you could do a Control F for the word naming.
Name system, name registration form.
Yep.
Thank you.
You bet. And then because I I want to not have the spreadsheet up. If you can just raise your hand when you've completed that, and I'll know when we can move on. Okay, just waiting on 3 folks. DAT-203-Vis, there it is. Okay, and got some hands went down. All right, anyone need help? I see Aaron, Chelsea, and Drew, your hands are still down. Do you need any help?
Is my hand up yet?
That's affirmative, yes.
Do you mean like my analog hand or something that I was supposed to do on the
I mean your digital hand inside the participant box.
Wait, hold on a second. I thought I did everything. Let me go.
You filled out the little form. That's all I need to know. I don't want to have it up, so I...
All right, okay. So if you ask me to put up my hand again, I'm not going to know what you're talking about. So what are you actually talking about?
So in the participant box, in the lower toolbar, there's a button that says raise hand.
Oh, okay.
Unfortunately,
Yeah.
I don't have it, so I can't show it to you.
All right, I'll look for it. Thank you.
Yep. Okay, so let's, thank you for that. The way I want to, the last class keeping thing to do is how we do attendance now that we don't have any folders. And so this method may change, but for now it's been working quite well. And so what I'd like you to do sometime during the class is, because I download and can keep a full record of the chat history, I've realized that that's going to be my most secure way of maintaining a attendance record. So what I'd like you to do is sometime during each session, send me a private message containing 2 pieces of information: your public identifier, and then the number of minutes or hours, whatever unit you want, of time invested in the class since the last time we met. And this, I have no intention of making this public or disclosing this to anybody until I've had a semester of trying it out as a completely, insofar as you remember to private message me, and insofar as Zoom does not goof and release private messages to meeting attendees, I'm trying to figure out how to, what's the right leveler of investment, or yeah, what's the right leveler of investment given that we have a vastly broad range of skills coming into my various classes, and so you know, if we all stay roughly the same elevation, going the same speed on the surface of the Earth, we should have a similar experience of time over the next 14 weeks. So that's the thing that I think levels us. And so I'm going to ask you to give me those two pieces of information. And when we think about the time, I'd like us to focus on the idea of low distraction. This is a pretty studious group, this the data bunch. I remember in my Python 2 classes having to shove people out the door. We're done. Go away. Be done. I'm leaving. So I'm not at all concerned about our data cohort not investing sufficient amounts, but rather I'm trying to get a gauge of sometimes if I'm not organizing the class right, there will be more time investment with less product than we might want. And so think about anything related to obviously the direct course process, gathering data for your visualization of self project, and to some extent, anytime you're working in a visualization library in Python, I would include that as well. I have looked, the college people have referenced at CCAC some sort of policy around, at least when I went to undergrad, there was an official policy of what's the expected time ratio of in class to out of class. People at CCAC have referenced such a policy. It doesn't actually exist. I've done a great deal of searching, and so I will not even attempt, maybe Paula has seen it, but I haven't. So I'm not gonna set a standard for this. I just wanna gather some data for at least half the term and do some analysis privately and see how much variation there is. So that's how we do attendance. So you can do that right now, your public identifier, and then your time. So maybe you spent a long time reading the syllabus this afternoon because you were bored. I hope not. I hope there's a lot better things to do. Any questions on attendance? So that's how we do that. And that way, knowing me and my pattern of teaching, I can, as long as you remember and I remember to record and or download the chat, then I'll have that officially marked. Questions on that? Concerns? Great. Okay. Next up on the agenda is visualization of self, this project. So, in fact, we may, I may limit us to that this evening, depending on how the discussion goes. So after a great deal of tinkering, I realized that streaming video or showing group shared video via Zoom screen share is a disaster. I have it set up so I can pipe DVD from a DVD player in through Zoom as an additional video feed. So that'll be useful for some of our clips. But what this means is I want us all to watch the visualization of self interview we did with Navia that's posted on YouTube in our schedule. But I think what will be best is to let each of you interact with the YouTube servers directly instead of having it slowed down by Zoom. So we're going to pause full group meeting for the half hour of the video and let you watch that during that half hour, and then we'll come back and discuss the project. So let me show you where that is, and I will chat out the Zoom or the YouTube link. It's posted on our schedule under week 4, so you can find it under week 4, and you can also pull up the Visualize Yourself project description that you can review as you go. And we're going to actually use the same Google Sheet so that you can, as you're watching the video, you can actually take a look at the tools that Navia is talking about. Navia's Tableau dashboard that she'll mention in the video is actually inside this. It's not, the CSS is all wonky, but you can actually tab through and explore her actual data in Tableau while you watch the video. So there's a lot of good stuff to think about and work on for the next half hour. And then, so that's the YouTube link last term did, and I'll do a little bit more commentary on that. So I'm here on the Spring 2020 tab. And let's just take a look at the inquiry questions. And what I'm going to invite you to do over the next 2 weeks is to start brainstorming inquiry questions. You can see Eric gave us a whole bunch, and that's a good place to start, is maybe thinking about what are the questions around which you could design an entire data project. And so one of the things Eric thought about was the relationship between his overall mood, his qualitative assessment of his experience in the world, with non-subjective measures of what he was tasked to do at work. He was a manager at Walmart in the beauty section. And so he gathered some very interesting work, and you can see almost everyone has a GitHub repo that contains quite a bit of data about their project. So I invite you to dig into some of that over the next 2 weeks. So Eric's example is one that involves the work context, but is personal, because he was trying to find connections between, is it the case that his mood is, to what extent is his qualitative reported mood related to the type of work he does? Sometimes his manager would pull him from his managerial work and say, go pull online orders for 8 hours. So things like that, he was wondering, are those kinds of redirections at work correlated with his negative assessment of mood? Natalie Morris got into Pitt's, I believe, health data science, economics, the brand new program in social and economic data, something like that. Interesting program. So she was interested in how her assessment of several qualitative experiences in how she started her day. So things like her morning commute. She designed a scaling system for, to what degree did she feel that her morning commute started her day off from a standpoint of aggravation. And then how did that, the key output that she was measuring was, did she complete all of her personally assigned daily tasks? So that was a really nice personal project. Rob didn't quite make it through. Sesssion, this was great. So Sesssion, some of you probably know, almost all of you probably know Sesssion and Xiaohong. They both got into Masters in Computer Science at Northeastern University. And so Sesssion had an interesting project that had a built-in quantitative scale, which was which way of learning vocab is the most effective: flashcards, watching English television, and she had a quiz program, an app. So she was able to measure how many words she could correctly define after a 2-week lapse. So that was a really neat idea, because there's very clear ways of creating quantitative scales for what she was about to do. Steph used Fitbit data and correlated that with her qualitative experience of anxiety. So she was wondering, if she had a rougher night's sleep, did that correlate with higher anxiety or self-reported anxiety levels the next day? And then Xiaohong, I don't remember specifically how he did his measurements, but he was also doing relationship between diet, sleep, and exercise. I'm sorry I don't remember much more about his project. But those are the, that's kind of a perspective on the realms of things that could be considered. Back on our fall 2020 tab, what I'll ask you to do over the next 2 weeks is come up with a plan in terms of a title, subject domain, inquiry question. And I'd also like you to get set up for a GitHub repo dedicated to this project. And so I'll ask you to set that up over the next 2 weeks. Let's jump back to the project page. So I've touched well on the project goals. I think I have a half-baked repository. Yeah, half-baked repository. And here's Navia's Tableau. The ultimate deliverables to think about are, we want to make this ultra shareable, and we want it to be able to contribute to your repository, your data portfolio, as you think about next phases in our data science program. So we want the code and the instruments, maybe not the data. If it's personal data, maybe you don't post the whole data to your repo, or you anonymize it somehow, but definitely outputs from that. And then once we get more into the Python, we'll have processing scripts that we'll want to push up to Git. If you're feeling ambitious, it might make sense to actually start your README file in your Git repo as a way of organizing your project, and then you don't have to do it all at the end. So we want to continue working with our Git skills, and then we'll put that link to your repo in the Google Drive. And so what I did, you could see from last term, is periodically as we go through the term, what I'll do is add, I'll add columns to the spreadsheet with updates. So you can see at various points over April, I was asking, what's the status of your project? So it gives us a chance to have some public accountability and also an organization scheme for seeing how things are going. And then, so here's actually, let's do this. I'm going to add another column for your icon. So because I want to be able to link your repo on our main site, let's add not only your URL to your Git repo, but also your material icon name. And so you can access that. This is Google's icon base, which is super cool. So what you'd put in here is if maybe if you're doing something about exercise, you can use the running person directions run. So I think you've done this before. So you'd put directions run in that box. And then my Git repo here. So I've had plans to scale up my email monitoring project. Like I said before, I think email should be considered a public health hazard. And so I wanted to create some data to go around that. So I scheduled this project out in phases, and things got a little nutty towards the end with COVID, so I didn't get all the phases planned out. But you can start in on phase 1, which is our setup, which we're talking about now. So find some time to go through this, and it'll be useful for you to, think about what your hypotheses are. What's your working relationship or theory about your key variables? And we'll dig into variable interaction modeling once we have a topic. So do some thinking about that. And then what we'll also do when we get back from our Labor Day break is in order to do some tinkering with tools, we'll actually try making some sample visualizations before you start gathering your data in order to visualize what kinds of relationships might you expect that you want to draw out. And so, well, what kind of data are you going to come up with? And that's what I mean by building a tool. So one of the components that one of the reasons why I don't want you to just use a third-party tool is I want you to have the experience of creating some sort of way to translate a qualitative experience into a measurable numeric value that can then be plotted side by side with other measurable components. And I have an example from someone that was quite eager to quantify things that might seem somewhat difficult to quantify. This particular person decided to quantify the qualitative experience of dating. And so this is an idea that this is why tool development is kind of interesting, because thinking about how would I go about quantifying a date with someone? Well, what are the different variables that you might code, and then figuring out a way to describe in qualitative terms what each of the particular values might mean. So in this case, there's this variable of overall relationship dynamic with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and the poles being kind of the most extreme, or the values that you can conceive of as being the most extreme. And sometimes it helps when you're building a scale to think about, what are the far poles that might only be theoretical. You may not even believe in the idea of soulmates, quote unquote, but it might be useful for figuring out where the endpoints of your particular scales are. So like Natalie had a quantitative scale for her rating her commute. How stressful was it? Was there accidents? Were there close calls? Was it noisy? Was it slow? Was it backed up? You want to find a way to come up with language that allows you to consistently code the same qualitative experience or subjective experience with a quantitative value that could then be averaged and plotted. Now here's an interesting thing to think about, which we'll get in a bit with indexes. I think we'll push indexes to after the break. Is your scales could cross 0 and go into the negative depending on how you might want to think about the ultimate crunching of that value, meaning maybe the neutral. So in this case, there's this idea of flirtiness. Could you have a negative flirtiness rating, in which case if you're combining several quantitative ratings using addition, a negative value on one of your metrics could actually reduce maybe an overall rating of some subjective experience. So you can see this person's trying to come up with as specific language as possible. An outside observer would probably readily deduce the intention of the exchange after a period of time, 5 to 10 minutes. So how do you code this kind of thing? So the weirdness coefficient, this would be an example where it looks like a negative value is related to an unpleasant weirdness versus a positive value being interesting. So these are all things to think about. And similarly, a sequencing idea. This person's project was relating, or the sequencing coefficients, the idea that if you have, it's kind of like the halo effect with interviewing, which if you interview a candidate that seems really negative, if you jump into an interview right next, the data suggests that a otherwise not very remarkable candidate can be seen as much more promising because of the fact that they came after a particularly negative experience. So I put this in there to get your brain going on what are the 1 or 2 or 3 different kinds of experiences that relate to your project that you might want to code somehow. So I'm going to stop there and open up for some questions, and I'm going to have our little spreadsheet here. I just copied and pasted your public identifiers from my Google response sheet into the first name column. So you all have a row dedicated there, ready to go. Let's just take a minute and open it up for ideas, questions, concerns. I was thinking about this. What do you think, Eric? If you've got an idea to pop in there, it's your row. I've never, actually haven't had anyone doing any funny business on my Google Docs. So you can use that as a brainstorm spot. So what are you thinking? Anyone have any budding, nascent ideas just waiting to happen? Maybe something, there's a whole bunch of COVID related stuff that probably could be done somehow.
We could deliberately infect ourselves and then track the course of the disease.
I'd have to turn off recording before we talk about that some more. You don't want to be associated with that.
I'm doing this thing with work where I work at home and work at the office on alternating weeks. Huh. So while I can't, I mean, it's kind of apparent to me like what I'm able to do, because I have to commute like 45 minutes either way, and like, so I can't think of like a specific thing right now, but I think that I would like to focus on something that is reliant on the fact that I'm in an alternating week schedule that's pretty unique to this time right now.
Great. So if I just take Steve's example, if we want to think about a diagrammatic flow of this kind of thing, one way to parse it out would be, what are your quote unquote outcome, I shouldn't say quote unquote, this is what they're called, outcome variables, meaning what's the measure that is a response to some condition or experience. So Steve, would it in your case be some sort of measure of productivity or task completion? What would be kind of the I wonder what happens to my blank when I work at home versus when I go to the office?
Yeah, maybe working out. Over the summer I've been taking some classes online, but I'm going to come to this class no matter what. But the other ones were, at your own pace. But the one that stands out to me because it'd be put on the back burner is to work out, I guess.
That sounds like an input. Yeah. So you're asking, how would working out affect, what's the thing you'd measure at the end? You're curious, you might be curious how working out affects task completion, or what's the dependent variable?
How working out affects, I don't know. That's tough because I don't have like any workout goals currently.
So if you want,
what about like how much you get to sleep, or like stress, anxiety level? Like, is it more stressful to have to go into the office every day because you're like on a time crunch?
Yeah, that's true.
So his input, so if we take the simplest model would be work type, home or office. And then maybe anxiety level could be 1, or like Natalie did last term, some sort of measure of task completion. If there's a way, so this is where the tool design comes in, which is if you don't have a systematic way to measure task completion, thinking about what would that look like? Would it be a count of tasks on a list? Well, that we could build out and say, well, not all tasks are equal. So maybe you end up building some sort of tool where maybe you have task, maybe your table looks like task, importance. So you come up with some sort of importance rating and maybe time requirement. So taking your outcome variables and then asking, how am I going to measure that systematically over time? That's what we want to try to get at.
You know, if I were going to do something like that, I think I would be interested in seeing if I'm working somewhere else, which takes more time with commuting and that sort of thing. Like, what do I lose in my life as a result of doing that? Like, where do I normally cut back? Like, do I eat crap because I don't cook? Or do I work out less or not as much? Or like, what do I do whenever forced with a commute? You know, what does that do to my life? So then you can have those different other factors like quality of eating or quality of workout or, you know, quality of whatever else it is you do, like sleep. Like, how much do you sleep? I mean, you might sleep less.
This is a good quality MRE, okay?
Yep. Ship it in a box.
What is
quality.
that?
So again, this is where designing the metric is kind of fun, because maybe sleep quality gets centered at 0, which is I have no particular what's the center of sleep. I feel neither tired nor energetic. And then you think about a negative restlessness or negative sleep value could be, you know, pains in my wrist, grogginess. You know, that the negative value could correspond with, wow, as a data analytics teacher, putting -1 to the left of -2, we are off to a great start. So thinking about what the scales look like, organizing numbers numerically would be a place to start. And then, like we're talking about, what are the labels that help you systematically rate at a 2 over the course of several months? And this, I found working in organizations, I think this kind of skill building with a personal project is very appropriate, because organizations are always trying to figure this kind of thing out. How do we aggregate measures of productivity, measures of employee satisfaction, customer satisfaction? It's surprising when I take occasionally customer satisfaction surveys how poorly they seem to be designed, where you give someone a scale of 1 to 10 and how would you rate the satisfaction of your shopping experience, 0 to 10. Well, there's so many different ways that people associate an experience with a number. To not have any qualitative descriptions of those values is a huge drawback in the data quality, because someone's 5 could be very different. You know, someone might think of 5 as neutral, and then 0 as terrible, and 10 is great. So all those kinds of things is what I want you to start mulling over. And again, our goal here is I'd like you to come back in 2 weeks and have enough of a framework that you can start a spreadsheet, or you can start something as a beta tool and try it. Even last semester we had people over, even 2 or 3 days later, they realized, oh, this isn't working, or it's too burdensome to collect my mood every hour. Eric was initially going to type his mood at work in to his phone every hour, and that was just too much. So he scaled that back to when he starts and at break time, and then at the end of the day. So that's what we mean by, we want to be able to iterate over the tool process one whole cycle before we start the true thing, and then we still want you to be able to have a month or 2 months of data. Other ideas?
What about like studying levels and sleep levels correlating to like your GPA and your level of stress, maybe?
Absolutely. So think about, so if one of your outputs is school grades, that's a good example of a metric over which you have only partial control, which is interesting because you can come up with some fun strategies for that. So if we take Eric's example, school, so you said school GPA, and so I would call this is some sort of an external value, meaning the GPA you get is partially a response to what you do and partially a response to how what you do interacts with this big system of courses and deadlines and stuff. So what you might have is you could have the official value, so you could have an official grade, and then so maybe you got and in other classes, I guess you get grades. So maybe you got a B, and then you might find that you have some sort of an adjustment that you add onto it. So based on your assessment of how that grading process went, you might have an adjustment of some amount of some grade point if you feel like this grade was unusually low because of some sort of grading policy that chopped half a grade off for being a day late on an assignment. Something like that you feel like doesn't necessarily have a good bearing on one of your input variables. What did you say your input variable might be? You're curious how what affects GPA?
Like the studying and like hours, and then also like sleeping and hours.
Yeah, so if in the case of studying, we would want some sort of studying quality, because as we all know, not every hour of studying is created equally. You could have maybe one or two, you could have a scale of like, you could come up with a kind of maybe an attention scale that you can rate how focused you are, and you can think about what the multipliers are. If you feel like your range of attention goes from completely unable to keep your mind on something all the way to some sort of Csikszentmihalyi flow like transcendent, maybe it goes in factors of 1, 10, and it goes up by orders of magnitude. That's going to be based on your qualitative experience of the range that you're trying to capture. Is it fair to say that you can study you could be 100 times more focused than your least focused moment? Oh, we got a little cat. That's a big cat. Is it a cat?
That's a dog.
Oh, it's a dog. Okay. Oh, I was going to say that is little dog. Hi, dog. Hi, doggy. Oh, it's so nice to have pets. So maybe your studying has quality. Maybe you have, what else could you rate for studying? How would you quantify studying?
I was just thinking like maybe also for every, like just totaling how much you do out of every class, because if GPA is like everything, and then for all of your classes, then
time per class.
I have this idea. Well, it's like, if you're in a class that's like heavily involved and you've got a syllabus that spells out everything that, the weightings, the attendance, the, tests, each test is like, 10% of your grade or whatever. You have those mapped out. Like a class is, maybe, a class attendance is like 2% of your grade. Every time that you attend, it accounts for 2% of the final grade. And then you also like overlay that with like sleep habits and time spent studying, or like for each night, whatever. I think you can end up getting like a whole, because there are going to be these high graded events like an exam, and like there are a lot of things that go into exam, like how much you study, but like also, like what kind of sleep you got that night, like what score you would give out of 100 to the meal that you ate that day. Like you can really like add in all these different factors to see. But like, for me, if I was doing something like that, I would end up like gaming it for myself. You know what I mean? Like I would end up, I would work really hard to do the right things because I'm trying to get accountable to it. And maybe that ends up making things that I wouldn't expect to align with the outcome. But you can really get like granular with how you like weight it, but it would take a lot of mapping out in advance, and it depends on how involved your classes that you're taking. Like, the syllabus.
So you may have an adjustment for class rigor. When we'll jump into indices 2 weeks from now, in which case we'll we'll actually work out a weighting scheme for how might we combine several quantitative measures. The example we'll use is the Human Development Index, which is a way to boil down a general state of societal health into a single number, and it combines life expectancy. The other two skipped my mind. Life expectancy, education rate, and maternal mortality. Those all go into a single number. So you may find that maybe you could build an index of academic output from a course that combines GPA and a qualitative rating of how rigorous was it. Was this the kind of thing that there are some classes that you might be able to do quite well on without doing any studying, in which case you'd want to weight that particular outcome perhaps as less influenced by the studying. If you didn't really need to study, the outcome of an easy class is not likely to be very related to that.
Yeah.
On that subject, there's two issues that I was reading about today. The one is the idea of multitasking. For example, if you have 5 classes and you spend a half an hour in each one, is that more effective than spending, say, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, 2 or 3 hours on each one? And there's also data that shows whenever you're studying a language, cramming is hopeless. You need to do it several times a day and just repeat it and repeat it and repeat it. So, things like that, like known, studies about studying different things, testing those sort of things might be interesting.
Absolutely.
Hey, I have like a methodological question here.
Yeah.
Do I actually have to pick some kind of subjective experience that I have to quantify, or can I just do stuff that I can measure? Because I'm not actually sure that I even know what it's like to have my own subjective experiences well enough to even give it like a rating that I can even believe. You see what I mean?
Absolutely. If you want to do something like gardening, I was thinking of you and your nettles. Something that's very measurable. Absolutely.
Well, I could do something like take my blood pressure and read the meter, but if I'm supposed to figure out how happy I am, I actually don't know the answer to that.
Oh,
right?
Yeah, I'm not suggesting that it must be a purely subjective experience. I encourage you to have something that you do scale numerically somehow, so you can have experience building a scale. But in your case, if everything is instrumental, I think that'd be fine.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure, because it sounded like that was part of what we had to do.
Like a lot of my classes, the have-tos are almost always a place to start.
Okay, thanks.
So I guess an issue is you're really talking about transforming something using a Likert scale, something that's relatively qualitative, and from a 1 through 10, right?
As a component of the project, yeah. So
Yeah,
Navia
okay.
had Navia's was more heavy on a tool created a numeric output with less qualitative scales. I'm adding in potential for qualitatively scaled items to the project.
Okay.
Yep.
Eric,
yes.
I've got a question. I've got an idea, but I'm thinking that there's a roadblock there. So if I wanted to measure something like, I guess, fitness endurance, right? And I guess the thought that comes to my mind is how long I can jump rope for, probably in seconds, right?
Mm-hmm.
So my first thought is, if I wanted to measure how a bunch of different inputs affect the length of time I can jump rope for, my first thought is that the most correlated thing to that will probably be the amount of, I guess, days I've been training or jumping rope, I guess. So obviously on the first day, there's going to be some, definitely a lower, I guess, time that I'd be able to jump rope than if I did it for 50 days. On that 50th day, I would definitely be able to do it for a longer time period. So my question is, if I wanted to kind of almost normalize that so that I'm not actually measuring, it's hard to explain. I want to almost take that out of the measurement, but I'd have to normalize the length of time and the effect that I guess consecutive almost practice would provide. So
because the notion of endurance,
like
because of the way you're conceiving of endurance.
Yeah, I mean, because if you're going to measure it in time, like I said, obviously the first day you're not going to be able to do it for as long as the 50th day. Especially, I don't consistently, jump rope right now, so it's not like that'll definitely be part of the improvement. But I almost want to take that out and figure out what other factors affect it the most. So I'm thinking of like linear regression, like a multiple linear regression model. But how would I take out the time, almost the time function of that?
I would look at some physiology textbooks and see what the standard measures of endurance are. I wonder if they have, if you're dividing.
Do you have to come up with like a regular, well, that's the thing. You don't even know if the slope would be linear, because you'd probably want to find the correlation of, how many days you've been training for and the time that you can do it, but you don't know if that's going to be linear or exponential. So I guess if you do use a multiple linear regression model, you can probably just, the results will be there, but I'm just wondering if that will take away from your ability to see the results of the impacts from the other variables.
As usual, your thinking is thoughtful and rigorous. I would say the most important thing for that would be to see what some industry standard measurements are and what the factors they use to go into that might be, because I don't know.
That's great. I know. For example, Walmart uses the concept of a learning curve. They say the more you sell to us, you should be able to do it better and cheaper. So they project how much less they're going to pay you wholesale for your product, just based upon, like, you're too stupid to make it less. Great, we'll buy it from somebody else. So, there are numbers out there. There are curves. So this is different than a learning curve, unless you call it a muscular learning curve. But the other factors might be like, how many calories did you have? Whenever you're exercising, you use up your, I believe, like the carbs first, and you don't go into fat burning. I don't think you go into fat burning at all for that. So, the diet would make a difference. How much sleep you had, how much other exercise you did.
Time of day. Yeah, whether you're doing it first thing in the morning, right after you woke up, or at the end of the day before you go to bed.
Right.
Exactly, and you can control for these things or not, But if you don't
just
control
work backwards from your conclusion, and that'll tell you how to do it.
What?
Yeah. Very, very clever, Aaron. So yeah, maybe it's some sort of normalized, how many seconds can you jump rope over carbs eaten beyond subsistence rate or something like that, as a way of normalizing or controlling for some underlying driver.
What if you did it like morning and evening or something like that, where you did it first thing in the morning, how long you could do it, last thing at night, how long you could do it, and then you could compare those two and see how those changed. So it might give you a little bit more of a control.
So at that point, though, the only thing you'd really be testing for is the difference between doing it in the morning versus doing it in the evening, right?
Well, not even so much that, but whether, is it more impactful in the morning in terms of, are those continually progressing on a linear slope, or is there variance more in the morning or more variance at night, and maybe some type of differential between the two of them?
Gotcha.
And so this might play into the idea of doing some beta gathering, beta data gathering, where how much variation do you see in jump roping your endurance sets at the morning and night, and then once you've done that for a couple of weeks, you might then adjust for time of day in the test, and then layer on the actual input variables that the exercises that you're actually doing to try to build endurance, that you'd want to be able to say neutral of time of day I test, or controlling for carb calorie intake, I did this kind of endurance training exercise every day. So the model might get more complicated, but you might want to do some initial data gathering to see how the output variable changes based on the inputs that you don't want to directly affect, but you want to control for. So maybe one thing to add into our spreadsheet might be, I'm just going to make this optional because I don't want to just layer stuff on, but maybe link to some sort of trusted external source. I bet a little bit of poking around, especially in health physiology or diet, that kind of thing, finding some sort of reference would be very helpful.
VO2 max for cardiac endurance, but I don't know how you would test that without equipment or measure it without equipment.
I bet you could get a little meter. Some people, I bet the health people love that kind of stuff with all those cool meters. Other than that, I will let us go this evening unless you have other questions. I'd like to jump in fresh to indexes now that we have had some time to digest this. So good to see all these familiar faces. Thanks for viewing video, those of you that feel in a position to do so. I realize that's not the case for everybody. So what I'm going to do right after this is I'll just move our project stuff up to the first week, and then I'll get our index link for week 2, and hope everyone does no work on Monday at all, ever. Anything else for
yeah,
course?
quick. Where are these recordings going to be? Are you going to put them on your YouTube channel?
I will. So here's my thinking. I realize that with 6 classes, I fall too behind on the clipping. So what I'll do is the Zoom will give me that Zoom link that I can post just the raw video on the schedule.
Mm-hmm.
And so
on the schedule, okay.
On the schedule. It takes, as you know, about an hour or so for the system to process it, and
Mm-hmm.
I'll post it within a day or 2.
Thank you.
So just like before, our grading process will be our standard proposals at midterm and final, project-based course, order the book, and it'll be off to the races. And I'll see some of you on Wednesday for Python 2.
Thanks, Eric.
See ya. Have a nice evening, everybody.
Thanks. Have a good night.
Cheers.
Thanks, Eric.
Yep. Bye. So you're still tutoring, Aaron? What's your? Are they trying to do that virtually now?
Yeah. So we're doing a lot there, and I have this new development where I can, since especially in the summer there weren't that many students coming in, I would do a different. At the same time, like for my other job, I'm gonna be doing accounting clerk work tomorrow while I tutor. So I just stop when somebody comes in. You know what I mean?
That's handy. That's double Double
Yeah, so
productivity.
it opens the door for me to actually do twice as much work as there is time to do it, because I'm at 2 jobs simultaneously. Don't tell anybody though, because I don't know if I can get in trouble for that.
So I gotta cut the recording off before.
Well, no, what I do though. Okay, so I'm just supposed to be sitting there waiting.
Yeah.
And so like if nobody comes in, right, I have to do something else or else I'm gonna go crazy.
Right.
So it's not really that, I'm not like actually pretending I'm at work at CCA. I'm actually not. So I don't think it's a problem.
Great. Well, I'm glad that's still going. We need all the math tutors we can get at the college. So.
Yeah, there's a lot of them though. I mean, it's starting to get scary over there because, well, now that this semester started, there's a lot of students. But before in the summer, I mean, we were like doing recreational math problems to try to keep ourselves from going insane because
oh jeez.
Because if we weren't doing that, then we'd start like debating like politics and stuff. So
and then the number of math tutors would go down by half every time you meet.
Yeah, and then the other thing is that people were snitching on each other recreation.
Oh, no.
So it was just not cool. So I started offering people prize money for problems.
Cool.
Cool. You can put like a little picture instead of yourself.
Yeah.
Well, I would put a problem and then the prize money. So I actually owe a couple people like 50 cents.
Stakes are high in the math department. Cool. Well, nice having you around. Anyone else? Questions, comments? Talked a little with Joanne.
See ya.
See ya. Bye. Rachel R, how you doing?
Got to unmute, sorry. Yeah, so I just did have a question. Didn't want to ask in front of everyone. Since I'm like, we're at home and I'm eating a lot more.
Yeah.
I just wanted to see like for exercise, like seeing how like my arm size and my leg size, like if I exercise more, like to lose weight, like how would I measure, like if I exercise, do stuff at home, like how would I measure that, like to lose weight?
I would get, I would look up, Steve, you seem to know a lot about this, but think about what the metrics would be that you could measure while you exercise. I would do a little bit of poking, like probably heart rate, intensity, type of exercise.
The Fitbits make it real easy. If you're cool spending money on that, that'll make it real easy, incredibly easy.
So
heart rate monitors are also probably even cheaper than a Fitbit. It can probably get you basic heart rate.
But I just to see like the output, or like my output would be like the size of my arm or leg, but then input would be what, like the
all your qualities of exercise. Yep.
Yeah.
Did you make that wall behind you?
No, it was in my house. It was already painted like that, so
that's cool. I like the shading.
I wanted to paint it, but I was like, that's too cool to paint. So
yeah, it's quite peaceful, even though it's like active and peaceful at the same time.
Yeah, it's like overkill at first, but
yeah, great. That's good. That's a good idea.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Cheers.
Bye.
Yeah, so I started to lose internet service around the time that I think you were probably just breaking up the class. I had to reconnect. I actually messaged you about it. Can you tell me what you just went over when you were wrapping up again?
Oh, I just said grading is the same kind of thing with no cards at midterm and finals, project-based learning, and order the book.
Okay, cool. So this week, just kind of spend time considering, what I might want to do. I mean, because I did a Fitbit thing last semester with you, but
that's right.
Seems like I could probably do other things with it, use it to incorporate. I can expand out with other things. So, yeah.
Yep, you could also shift gears entirely and do something more external if there's other things you could measure around your life or in things you're doing.
Yeah. I'm going to have to, it's food for thought. Not sure yet. All I know is that this thing just, collects all kinds of data all the time, and it's easy to just pull it.
Oh, yeah. It might be time to try something else.
Okay.
Yeah, you're a very thoughtful person, so I've no doubt.
Okay. All right. Thanks, man. We'll see you later. Have a good week.
See ya. I will.
Yeah, I'll see you. Well, I'll see you on Wednesday.
Great.
See ya.
Hello, iPad. So your name shows up as.
I need to change that.
What's up?
So no, I was thinking about doing tasks completed at work and doing it based on like interruptions. So like emails, tasks, text, IMs, impromptu meetings, phone calls, things like that. Stuff that's not planned. So, and then base it on, number of hours worked, task completed, and then maybe the qualitative would be like, how do I feel? Do I feel like, even though there were a small number of tasks completed, do I feel successful? How is that impacted on by, maybe I only got one task completed, but I had all these interruptions, but I still feel very successful. Yeah,
I'd certainly do a qualitative sense of maybe a productivity index. I'd also rate, my experience with interruptions is some of them have more residue than others. If it's a phone call that you can answer and then your brain can just release it, versus if I get a phone call that was asking me to do something that I can't do now, in which case it has this emotional residue. So you might consider start with the simplest scale of like maybe just start by making a list of all the things that interrupt you, and see if you can categorize them in terms of type of interruption.
Right. Okay.
And see
like a customer calling versus like somebody internal that it's like do it and you're done versus your boss dumping on your desk.
Maybe there's something, maybe if it's social, personal versus work related. So I think you'll find those categories boil out nicely. And I think in order to make that data meaningful, you'll want as much resolution as you can around productivity without being burdensome. So, if you're logging like tickets and stuff at work, that would be an obvious outcome. And maybe you attach to those some sort of size marker so that you can normalize across task size instead of task count, because task count is not going to account for some things are a lot more work than others. So I think that's
maybe like how many, almost like you can almost quantify it on like how much time you could spend on tickets and item resolution where you're actually actively working on tasks versus basically getting interrupted.
And a tool that might make something like that really easy, it might be an app on a phone, but something like a stopwatch that's really easy to you just click it, just a button. I'm working, I'm not, so that you could try it for a day and see if it's too much. Something like that could be really useful. I just lost you. Oh no. Oh, because the strings are too high.